Picture the tallest person you have ever seen in your life. Now imagine standing next to one of your ancestors and realizing they make that person look small. This is not mythology, this is not legend, this is the fossil record, and it raises a question nobody prepared you for. If some of your ancestors were built like that, why aren't you? The answer involves an arms race, an island, a hobbit, and a rule of nature so strange it sounds invented. And by the end, you will understand something about your own body that most people never think to ask. Start with what you think you know. Most people, when they imagine early humans, picture something small and hunched, barely upright, shuffling through the grass with a rock in one hand and confusion on its face. That picture is wrong. Around 2 million years ago, something happened in the human family tree that researchers are still trying to fully explain. Body size jumped. Not gradually, not slowly, not in the way most evolutionary changes creep forward across millions of years. It jumped. The average hominin before that moment weighed around 40 kilograms. The average after it weighed closer to 60. That is a 50% increase in body mass happening across a relatively compressed window of evolutionary time. The scientist Mark Grabowski, who led one of the most detailed studies of hominin body size ever published, described it as one of the most significant physical transformations in human evolutionary history. Not just bigger bodies, different bodies. Bodies built for longer distances, for more demanding environments, for a world that was getting more dangerous and more competitive at exactly the same time. Homo erectus was the result, and Homo erectus, standing up to 1.8 meters tall, weighing up to 68 kilograms, moving across landscapes from Africa to Asia, was for nearly 2 million years the most successful large-bodied primate that had ever lived. So far, the story makes sense. Bigger meant better. Bigger meant you could cover more ground, carry more food, fight off more threats, survive longer seasons of scarcity. But then something happened that broke the pattern entirely. In 2003, on a small Indonesian island called Flores, archaeologists found something inside a cave called Liang Bua that nobody had predicted and that the scientific community spent years refusing to fully accept. A skeleton, roughly 1 meter tall, an adult, not a child with a growth disorder. An adult member of the genus Homo who, fully grown, stood at the height of a modern 3-year-old. The species was named Homo floresiensis. The press called them the hobbits, and the moment scientists started dating the remains, the mystery deepened. These were not ancient. They were not a forgotten early branch that died out 2 million years ago when everything was still small. Homo floresiensis survived on Flores until approximately 50,000 years ago, which means they were alive at the same time as anatomically modern humans, at the same time as Neanderthals, at the same time as you would have recognized the people walking past them as something close to human. And they were 1 meter tall. How does a lineage descended from the large-bodied Homo erectus shrink to a third of its ancestors' height and survive for hundreds of thousands of years on an island while the rest of the human family was getting bigger? The answer is called the island rule, and it is one of the stranger corners of evolutionary biology. When a large-bodied animal becomes isolated on an island, something predictable begins to happen. The island has limited food. There are no predators large enough to threaten a population of reasonably sized hominins, and there is no competitive pressure from other large species arriving from the mainland. In that environment, being big stops being an advantage. Big bodies need more food. More food means more competition within the group. More competition means more deaths. And so, over generations, the pressure reverses. The individuals who happen to be slightly smaller survive slightly better. They need less food. They reproduce more successfully. And slowly, across thousands of generations, the population shrinks. Not because something went wrong, because something went exactly right for that environment. The pygmy elephants of Flores shrank by the same mechanism at the same time. The largest animals on the island getting smaller. The rule working on every large species simultaneously. And it worked on Homo floresiensis for so long and so completely that by the time modern humans arrived on Flores, they encountered a relative who had been quietly miniaturizing for 700,000 years. But here is the part of the story that nobody usually tells you. The island rule works in both directions. While large animals on islands shrink, small animals on islands get bigger. Rodents on islands tend to grow to sizes that would seem impossible on the mainland. Insects reach dimensions that have no continental equivalent. And there is evidence, from sites across the Mediterranean, from islands in the Pacific, from ecosystems researchers are still mapping, that something similar happened to at least some populations of early hominins when the pressures reversed. When isolation, abundant food, and the absence of predators created an environment where being bigger, even dramatically bigger, became the advantage. The Denisovans, a group of archaic humans known primarily from fragments of bone found in Siberia and Tibet, show skeletal evidence suggesting some populations may have been substantially larger than Homo sapiens. The evidence is fragmentary, the debate is ongoing, but the pattern fits. Size in the human lineage was never fixed. It was never one answer to one question. It was a dial, being turned by environment, by predator pressure, by food availability, by isolation, by competition, sometimes turning up, sometimes turning down. And the direction it turned was not random. It was always an answer to a specific problem that a specific population was facing in a specific place. So where does that leave you? You are, by the standards of the full range of human body size across the last 4 million years, roughly in the middle. Not the giants that emerged when Homo erectus spread across a continent under predator pressure. Not the miniatures that emerged when populations became trapped on islands with limited food. You are the size you are because of where your specific ancestors happen to be and what specific pressures they happen to face. In the 10,000 to 50,000 years before the agricultural revolution, stabilized population sizes and reduced the environmental variability that drove the most dramatic changes. The researcher Anne Gibbons spent years tracking the evidence for body size variability across hominin species, and her conclusion was careful and striking. There is no single human body size. There never was. The diversity we see between modern human populations today, the range from the tallest to the shortest living groups on Earth, is modest compared to the range that existed across hominin species simultaneously, walking the same planet, sometimes even the same region at the same time. 1 meter, 1.8 meters, both Homo, both successful in their own environments for hundreds of thousands of years. Here is the question that follows from all of this. If size is so flexible, if the human lineage has proven it can scale up or scale down within a few 100,000 years in response to environmental pressure, what does that tell you about the rules you think are fixed? Your height, your build, the frame you were handed at birth, the one that feels like the most permanent thing about you, the thing that defines how you move through every room you enter. It is not fixed, it never was, it is an answer. An answer to a question your ancestors faced, in a place you have never been, under pressures you will never experience, a question that was being asked and answered long before anyone alive today existed. The giants are gone, the hobbits are gone. What remains is you, shaped by a set of environmental negotiations that began millions of years ago and are, in a very real sense, still running. Your body is not who you are. It is where the story got to the last time the environment asked the question. And somewhere, right now, on a planet that is changing faster than at almost any point in the last 10,000 years, the question is being asked again.